Marek Kowalski stared lazily out of the window of the car, which was rolling along the dusty road of a small Polish village. Green fields, well-tended gardens and modest houses with tiled roofs stretched outside the window. Everything around reminded Marek of his childhood trips to his grandmother's house on summer holidays, but now he was here for a different reason. His father, Adam Kowalski, a big businessman and owner of a construction company, was planning to buy several plots of land for a new project. Marek was accompanying him more out of whim than out of necessity. In reality, he just didn't want to stay in Warsaw and be bored. "Don't you dare embarrass yourself," Adam said coldly, pulling his son from his thoughts. "This isn't your partying in the capital. Things are different here. People work, not party. Understand?" Marek grinned and looked away. He knew his father's temper, strict, principled, and even too correct for a businessman of his level. But Marek was different. He lived by his own rules and liked to feel superior to others. Daddy's millions allowed him not to think about the future, so he saw life as an endless game. When the car stopped in front of a small farm, Marek saw a typical picture of village life. Chickens were running behind the fence, an old tractor stood by the barn, and someone was hanging laundry outside the house. It was a girl in a simple dress, with long dark hair in a braid. She did not immediately notice the guests and went on with her work. "This is where we'll start," Adam said, getting out of the car and adjusting his jacket. "Here?" Marek said, lazily climbing out. "Dad, this is..." He looked round the area with an expression of obvious disgust. "This is not a business, it's chickens and manure." "Shut your mouth," Adam said sharply. "You have no idea how a real business starts." Marek snorted but remained silent. His father headed towards the house, and he followed reluctantly, casting bored glances at the neighborhood. When they got closer, the girl spotted them and froze for a second, then headed towards them. "Good afternoon," she said quietly, wiping her hands on her apron. Her voice was soft and a little unsure. "What can I do for you?" Adam introduced himself and explained the purpose of the visit. While the adults discussed the land, Marek considered the girl from head to toe. She looked plain, but there was something in her eyes that was alive. Honest. Alien to him. "And this is my son, Marek," Adam added, noticing Marek's lack of interest in the conversation. "Hi," Marek said casually, shoving his hands in his pockets. The girl nodded and smiled shyly, but said nothing. "Eva," she finally introduced herself. Eva, how boring, Marek thought, glancing round at her again. But his thoughts were interrupted by voices behind him. A jeep pulled up to the house and three of his friends, Paweł, Tomek and Oscar, got out. When Marek saw them, he immediately cheered up. "Now it's going to be more fun," he said under his breath and went towards the car. "Look at her," Oscar laughed, standing by the car and looking round the farm. "Marek, would you move here? To milk a cow early in the morning, eh?" "Ridiculous," Marek grinned. "I'm not here of my own free will. It's my father and his business." "The cabbage and potatoes business?" "Not bad," added Tomek, winking at Marek. The conversation turned to their usual topics: who made money on whom, who hooked up with whom, who went to which club on the weekend. Amidst all this noise, Marek suddenly noticed Eva standing outside the house, looking at them. It was the look of someone used to ridicule. She turned away and went back to her business. Maybe Marek could have a new challenge. Paweł suggested with a chuckle, sipping water from a bottle. "What do you mean?" Marek squinted his eyes. "You like to prove that you can do anything. Here, look at this girl. She's exactly what you can't do." Marek grinned and shifted his gaze to Eva. "Are you kidding?" he said, trying to hide his surprise. "No, I'm not joking," Paweł added fuel to the fire. "A bet, you can make her fall in love with you and marry you." "Otherwise what?" "Otherwise you're a sucker, Marek," Oscar replied, smirking. Marek felt anger boiling up in him. Loser, that word had always struck a nerve with him. He couldn't afford to lose in front of his friends. A bet? Merrick asked, looking at his friends defiantly. You know we don't trifle, replied Tomek. Here's the deal, if you do well, we'll pay you enough for a new car. Merrick thought for a moment, then grinned. It's a deal. Just don't think of regretting it later. The friends laughed and began to discuss the details of the bet. Merrick glanced at Eva, who was carrying something in the courtyard, and felt a strange feeling as if he didn't fully realize what he was getting into. It's only a game, he reminded himself. Merrick watched Eva from afar, trying to figure out where to start. He wasn't used to getting women's attention, it usually happened by itself. A couple of smiles, a few compliments, an expensive dinner, and they were at his feet. But it was different with Eve. She seemed so simple. And that's what annoyed him. Well, Major, have you thought of a way to hunt the farmer? Pavel asked mockingly, nudging him in the side. Wait, Merrick hissed, trying not to show his irritation. Everything will happen. He waited for a moment and approached Eva as she was going to the well with a bucket. The girl noticed him, but pretended to be busy with her work. Merrick stopped beside her and gave her the most charming smile he could muster. It's hard for you here, isn't it? He began, looking at her hands, which were red from work. I'm getting by, Eva answered dryly, not looking up at him. I'm Merrick. I think we've seen each other before, he added, as if trying to make conversation. Yes, Eva nodded. You and your father came to talk about the land. That's right. Listen, are you always this serious? I thought country girls were more friendly. Eve raised her head and looked at him. There was no irritation or anger in her gaze, just incomprehension. Did you want something? She asked calmly. Merrick was confused for a moment. He wasn't used to that tone. Usually women responded to his smile with joy, or at least embarrassment. But here was a girl who looked at him as if she could see right through him. Just thought I'd help, he finally said, picking up the bucket. Thanks, but I'll do it myself, Eva replied, taking the bucket back. Merrick didn't know whether to laugh or be angry. He turned back to his friends, who were standing in the shade of an old oak tree and watching what was happening. How's it going, Casanova? Oscar chuckled loudly. Shut up, Merrick muttered, sitting down on the bench. This is going to be harder than you thought, isn't it? Pavel added, smirking. I don't care. I'll get what I want, Merrick gritted his teeth. In the evening, Merrick lay in his room in the old hotel where his father had put them. He tried to sleep, but again and again Eva's face came before his eyes. Simple, without makeup, but yet somehow real. Funny, he thought. He'd never really paid attention to girls like that, had he? But there was something strange about Eva. She wasn't reacting to him the way he expected. The next morning Merrick woke up earlier than usual. His father had already left for a meeting, so he decided to seize the moment. Taking the keys to his father's car, Merrick set off for the farm. When he arrived, Eva was just working in the vegetable garden. She was on her knees going through the plants and didn't even notice him. Merrick came closer and coughed deliberately loudly. Good morning, he said, leaning against the fence. Eva raised her head and squinted slightly against the sun. Why are you here? She asked bluntly. I got bored. Thought I'd see how you were doing. Maybe I could help you with something? Eva grinned and lowered her head again. You expect me to believe that a businessman's son suddenly decided to help out on the farm? Why not? I'm a human being too. I can work with my hands, Merrick said, surprised at his own words. Eva got up and shook off her knees. Here, then, she said, handing him a basket of apples. You can take them to the barn. Merrick grimaced, but took the basket. It was heavier than he had expected. Eva watched him with a slight smile as he dragged it to the barn. What's so funny? Merrick threw, setting the basket on the floor. Nothing. I just didn't expect you to agree. I'll surprise you again, said Merrick, again sporting his trademark smile. Eva didn't answer, but something resembling interest flashed in her gaze. A few days passed. Merrick began to appear at the farm more and more often. He made up various excuses, either to help with something, or just to talk. Eva was wary at first, but gradually got used to his presence. She began to open up a little, talking about her life, about the farm and how she had dreamed of going to the city but had come back to help her parents. "You could be anything," Merrick said one day as they sat on the front porch. "Maybe," Eva replied, looking at the sunset. "But life has turned out the way it has. Don't you think you deserve more? Don't you think too much of me?" She replied with a slight smile. Merrick grinned, but said nothing. He was beginning to realize that this girl wasn't just part of his game. She was different. But the thought of the bet kept him on his toes. He knew his friends expected him to get a result. And Merrick couldn't lose. "It's only a game," he kept repeating to himself as he looked at Eva. But every time she smiled or said something sincere, something inside him shifted. It had been about a week since Merrick had started visiting the farm regularly. His friends waited with derision for reports of progress, while his father was unsuspecting, completely immersed in his business meetings. It had become part of Marek's daily schedule to pretend to be interested in the life of the farm, to pretend to be interested in what Eva was talking about. But what surprised him most was that he was actually becoming interested. Ridiculous, he thought as he walked back to the hotel one evening. After all, it's only a game. Morning on the farm. The sun was just rising when Merrick arrived at the farm again. He was no longer surprised at how easy he had become to wake up in the morning. He found Eva near the vegetable garden, feeding the chickens, and an old cat standing beside her, lazily squinting at the sun. "Good morning," Merrick said, coming closer. Eva turned and looked at him in surprise. "Are you here again?" There was a slight irony in her voice. "Why wouldn't I be?" Merrick smirked and sat down on the fence. "I'm almost used to your lifestyle." "Really? Come on then, you can help me with the seedlings," Eva said, holding out a pair of work gloves to him. Merrick froze. "With the seedlings?" "Yes. Or did you think farm life was just about looking at chickens and apple trees?" Eva grinned, turning her back to him. Well, that's a challenge, Merrick thought, and, giving into some inner excitement, put on his gloves. An hour later. "Are you kidding me?" Merrick groaned, wiping his forehead with a hand stained with earth. "It's not that hard," Eva replied calmly, continuing to plant the seedlings. "It's just that you're used to someone doing all the dirty work for you." Merrick froze, surprised by her words. Usually no one dared to speak to him in that tone of voice. He was used to flattering compliments and feigned politeness, but not to such frankness. "Maybe," he said suddenly, looking at her. Eve raised her head and looked at him in surprise. "What?" "Maybe you're right," Merrick repeated and shrugged his shoulders. "It's just that I've never thought about it." "It's never too late to think about it," Eva replied, returning to her work. Merrick felt something squeeze inside him. For the first time in a long time he had heard a truth he could not ignore. An evening at the village club. That night, Merrick and his friends decided to unwind. There was a small cafe in the village, which the locals called the club. It was nothing special, a few tables, an old jukebox and cheap beer. The place was foreign to Merrick, but his friends were delighted with the color. "Look who's here," Powell said, nodding towards the door. Merrick turned round and saw Eva. She was standing at the entrance with her friend, dressed in a simple dress, but looking very different. Not as tired and loaded as usual. She was even smiling. "Lucky you, Merrick," Oscar chuckled. "She doesn't even look at you." "Maybe I'm just not used to attracting attention," Merrick snorted and headed for the bar. But Eva noticed him. Their gazes met and she smiled, sincerely and a little embarrassed. Merrick felt his heart go off rhythm for a second. "Would you like to keep me company?" he asked suddenly, approaching her table. Eva was surprised, but nodded. "Okay. But just for a little while." "Why? Running home to the chickens?" Merrick joked, sitting down opposite. Eva grinned. You're incorrigible. Is that a compliment? Maybe. Merrick suddenly caught himself thinking that he liked being around her. Not as part of his game, but just like it. But then his friends entered the hall, laughing and talking among themselves. One of them said loudly, "Merrick, what's up? Are you making progress? Is the wedding coming up soon?" Eva's eyes widened. She looked at Merrick with incomprehension. "What's he talking about?" she asked. "Don't listen to them," Merrick said quickly, feeling everything inside him clench. "What wedding?" Eva insisted. "It's a joke." "Just a joke," Merrick muttered, avoiding her gaze. Eva looked at him for a few more seconds and then stood up. "I have to go. Good night." "Eva, wait." "Good night, Merrick," she repeated and headed for the exit. Merrick felt as if something important had just slipped through his fingers. His friends, meanwhile, started laughing again. "You're a romantic, Merrick," said Powell, clapping him on the shoulder. "Shut up," Merrick hissed, rising from the table. Late evening. Merrick sat on the hotel porch for a long time, looking at the starry sky. He thought about Eva, about her look of disbelief, and about his friends who kept adding fuel to the fire. "What am I doing?" he thought, clutching the empty bottle in his hand. But he found no answer. The next day, Merrick arrived at the farm again, but Eva was gone. Instead he saw her father, an elderly man with a tired face and kind eyes. "Hello," said Merrick, getting out of the car. "Eva's not here?" "She's gone to town on business," replied his father, giving him a strange look. "And you, son, tell me honestly, what do you want?" Merrick froze. "I just wanted to help." "Help?" The old man grinned. "Son, no offense, but you don't look like someone who helps for nothing." Merrick couldn't find anything to say. The old man gave him another glance and walked towards the house, leaving Merrick alone with his thoughts. "What do you want?" echoed in his head. And he didn't know the answer. Merrick returned to the hotel with a heavy heart. Thoughts of Eva haunted him, the sight of her in the village club haunted him. He was angry at himself for letting his friends interfere, but even more so at his own weakness. He'd always thought of himself as a man in control of every situation, but now things were spiraling out of control. 2 days passed and Eva still hadn't returned to the farm. Merrick drove past several times, hoping to see her, but only caught sight of her parents. He had to admit that he missed her, a feeling he had long ago stopped feeling. One evening, as the sun was slipping towards dusk, he drove to the farm again, but saw an empty yard. As he was about to leave, he noticed Eva in the distance, walking along the road with a basket of fruit. He stopped the car and went towards her. "Eva!" he called out. She stopped, turned round and sighed when she saw him. "Why are you here?" she asked coldly. "Can I talk to you?" Merrick asked, stepping closer. "Explain." "Explain what?" Eva interrupted. "That this was all a joke? Part of some stupid bet?" Merrick froze. "It's not as easy as it looks." "Is it?" Her voice got harder. "What's so hard about it? Are you just having fun, playing the good prince?" Merrick lowered his head, for the first time not knowing what to say. "Eva, I didn't mean for things to turn out this way. What did you want?" Her eyes glistened with held-back tears. "For me to believe you? To fall in love with you?" He took a step forward, but she stepped back. "I don't want your explanations," Eva said quietly. "Go away." Merrick felt his inside shatter. He took one last desperate step. "Look, I know I was wrong. But that's changed. You changed me." Eva was silent for a few seconds, then shook her head. "People don't change that easily, Merrick." She turned away and walked away, leaving him alone on the empty road. In the evening, Merrick sat in his hotel room, feeling like he had never felt before. His friends were long gone, his father was busy with business, and he was alone with the emptiness inside. Eve's words rang in his head, echoing with a pain he wasn't prepared for. He tried to focus on something else, but the memories of her face and voice came back again and again. Picking up his phone, he dialed her number but didn't dare press the call. Another week passed. Merrick tried to stay away from the farm, but one day, on his way back to the hotel, he spotted Eva at the bus stop. She was standing with a small bag, clearly about to leave. Without thinking, he stopped the car and ran out to her. "Eva! Wait!" She turned round, but didn't look surprised. "You're here again," she said quietly. "Don't go," Merrick pleaded, grabbing her hand. "Please stay." "Why?" Her voice trembled. "To be part of your game again?" "No," he shouted. "I'm not playing. I haven't for a long time." Eva stared at him, as if trying to find a shred of sincerity in his words. Merrick hesitated. "I was an idiot. I knew it from the beginning, but I can't leave without telling you the truth." Eva was silent. "I've fallen in love with you, Eva. It's true. And that's what scares me the most." Tears came to her eyes, but she turned away quickly, gritting her teeth. "Your words mean nothing, Merrick, it's too late." She picked up her bag, but he blocked her path again. "Give me a chance. One last chance. I'll make it up to you." Eva closed her eyes, fighting the emotions that came with it. At that moment, a bus pulled up, silencing everything around them. Merrick let go of her hand, realizing he had lost. Eva slowly climbed the steps of the bus, but turned round at the last moment. "You said you'd changed," her voice sounded muffled. "Prove it." The bus doors closed, and Merrick was alone on the empty road, staring after the departing bus. For the first time in his life he felt that he really had something to lose. Merrick stood on the empty road long after the bus had gone round the corner. Eva's words, "Prove it," echoed in his head. For the first time in his life, he realized that no amount of money, no connections or victories could win back her trust. This was something new, something he had never encountered before. Back at the hotel, he walked past reception without noticing the staff's greetings. Closing the room door, Merrick sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around his head. For the first time in his life, he felt completely helpless. "What have I done?" he whispered. His thoughts flitted feverishly between past and present. Eva had trusted him, and he'd ruined it all with one stupid bet. But what frightened him most was the realization that everything now depended on him alone. The next day Merrick woke up early, as if something inside told him that he needed to act immediately. He took out his laptop and started looking for information about his father's project. The list of plots to be bought out was in front of his eyes. Among them was Eva's family's farm. "Holy shit," he muttered, feeling a new rush of guilt. He knew full well that his father's project would demolish the entire village neighborhood for a luxury cottage estate. It was a huge deal, and his father certainly wasn't going to back down. "No, I won't leave it like that," Merrick decided and quickly got ready. A few hours later Merrick was already sitting in his father's office in Warsaw. Adam raised an eyebrow in surprise at seeing his son unannounced. "Merrick? What are you doing here?" "I need to talk about the project in the village," Merrick began, trying to remain calm. "What's wrong?" Adam became wary. "We're signing contracts next week." "Stop it," Merrick said firmly. Adam leaned back in his chair and frowned. "Is this some kind of prank?" "I mean it. Don't buy out Eva's farm. Give them a chance to keep their land." "Are you out of your mind?" Adam replied coldly. "This is business, Merrick. If we don't buy this land, someone else will." "I'll find the money to buy it myself," Merrick insisted. "Money?" Adam grinned. "You're nothing without me. Where will you get that kind of money?" Merrick fell silent, feeling the rage seize him. "Then I'll leave," he said sharply. "Without you." "I'll find a way." Adam looked at him for a long moment, as if seeing him for the first time. "Was it for the girl?" he asked quietly. Merrick nodded. She changed me. And I can't pretend it doesn't matter anymore. Adam rose slowly and walked over to the window. He was silent for a few moments, then sighed heavily. Okay. You have a month to find the money and make the deal. If you fail, I'll finish the project myself. Merrick nodded silently, holding back his relief. The next days turned into a frantic race. Merrick sold his car, withdrew the money he had saved from his accounts and took out a loan against his property. He worked from morning till night, consulting lawyers and negotiating with banks. Several times he wanted to call Eva, but each time he stopped. He knew this was his battle. First he had to prove his sincerity with actions. A month passed. On the last day before the deadline, Merrick signed all the necessary papers. His hands trembled as he put the last signature, handing over the check for the farm. It's your property now, the lawyer said, handing him the keys. Merrick nodded, but felt no joy. Now the hardest part awaited him. Early in the morning he arrived in the village again. His heart was pounding as if it wanted to burst out of his chest. He saw Eva on the porch of the farm. She was looking at his car in surprise. "Merrick?" she said confusedly. He came closer, stopped a few steps away from her, and handed her the keys. "This is yours. I've sorted everything out. No one else owns the farm but you and your family." Eva froze, unable to believe her ears. "What? How?" "I don't need anything in return," Merrick added quietly. "Just know. I'm sorry." She stared at him, trying to comprehend what had happened. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she quickly looked away, fighting her emotions. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because I love you," he answered, looking her straight in the eyes. Eve clenched the keys in her hand, feeling her heart pound faster. "Prove it," she said, repeating her words at the bus stop. Merrick stepped forward and took her hands in his. "I'm ready to prove it every day," he said firmly. Eva couldn't stand it. Tears ran down her cheeks. For the first time she allowed herself to believe that this man in front of her was sincere. Merrick hugged her gently, feeling the heavy weight finally lifted from his soul. They stood in the middle of the old farm, in the place that had been the beginning of their most important story.